Hey guys, I'm here today with professional investor and property management guru David Katz. And David has been a long-term partner. He has just finished up some ADUs on a property in Culver City. And this is interesting. David, tell me who you're renting to.
Very good question, Meredith. So we're catering to a quite an array of clientele. Right now, we're looking at LMU students, grad students, at the university, just 5 minutes from the property. But we have ads on over 30 different sources, catering to families, business professionals, what have you. These are brand new construction ADUs with very high-end finishes and a very sought after Culver City location, just minutes from everything you can think of. Marina Del Rey, downtown Los Angeles, Santa Monica, downtown LA, you name it, LAX, we've got it. So yeah, these are amazing units. It's a very exciting opportunity.
Very cool. But today we're talking about property management, right? Because many people want to do their own property management, but it's really scary. Like you're hearing stories about squatters and crazy tenants beating up that brand new ADU that you put so much love and attention to. You are the professional. What are you seeing out there in the marketplace? Now, you live in Orange County, but you got a lot of property in LA. And I would say LA is pretty bad in terms of the quality of renters. You also have rent control in some places like City of LA. What are the worst problems you're seeing, and how are you deftly avoiding those?
Very good questions, Meredith. I mean, the most important thing is having a really good property management company to help screen your applicants. We have the most thorough processes to vet out every potential applicant to the furthest degree possible. So we got everything from in-state to out-state screening. It looks at their background, finances, credit, etc., and all of those little details that all add up and count to build you the best fit, best tenant for your investment, so that your investment thrives and your tenants are happy. In those situations, I've seen that we've avoided some squatting issues, some serious delinquency issues. You can see early signs of potential future delinquencies. And so far, we've been very fortunate, and we have brought in all of our tenants have been amazing quality, and we haven't had a single delinquent tenant brought in under using our processes at Mariners. So I am very happy to report that. But we've avoided some pretty big potential challenges, and not only with having really solid, just great people in our units, but they're paying just the right rents, if not higher, to maximize the value of your asset. And then also they're staying well over the initial 1 year term. So that's saving you as an investor all of those turnover costs in the long term too. And one of the biggest silent killers I run into on the financials is your vacancy loss. So each day that you have a vacant unit sitting, is a day that you're not collecting rent. So that's kind of one of the biggest things that I look at too is balancing that screening, as you mentioned, to overcome those challenges we've seen in the market, but also filling them also expediently as well. So.
What do you see? Like, why are turn times and turnover? Why is that so bad for property owners? What happens? What's the time frame? What are the costs typically?
Very good question. So I would say on an average turn that's in excellent condition, you're looking at several hundreds of dollars. Labor costs have gone up quite a bit. So your potential for saving money there becomes more narrow year over year with rising minimum wage costs. Costs for construction and materials are just rising by the year. So we have to get more creative each year to keep those costs down far below current year's levels to put more money in your pocket as an investor. And so we have those resources set up too on our team to ensure not only you're getting the very best bang for your buck, but to keep those costs down too. Because if it's not, it can cost you well into the thousands for a turnover.
So what do you said hundreds of dollars, like, but if the tenant leaves and it's pretty clean, like, shouldn't there essentially be no turnover cost? I mean, it's a brand new ADU. What would that cost?
Probably just about, depending on your cleaner, I mean, and how big the unit is, you can say somewhere around 150 or so to clean it. So if it's like a house size one, obviously 200 plus in most cases. But if it's like a real much smaller unit, probably low to mid ones for a solid cleaner, I'd say, without any repairs.
Okay. What about what repairs, even on newer units, do you typically see? What should a homeowner expect?
Also great questions. I'd say just normal wear and tear. You'll see like paintings that were taken off the wall, just that were had to be hung up, and those require nails in the wall. So you're going to have at minimum, two or $300 in touch-up paint and materials to make it look brand new again. So I mean, you might find someone for a hair bit less. That's a handyman, but any specialist, especially that specializes in turnkeys, will be on the higher end. I will say one thing as well. Most turnovers last about 10 to 14 days, so about 2 weeks for a lot of turnkey vendors. We're one of the few that gets your units turned within 72 hours or less. So
So let's imagine client moves out at the end of the month. Then what happens? What should they expect? Homeowners, property owners expect?
For as far as turnover costs, hopefully, I mean, most of the
And time
tenants,
frame.
yeah,
Yeah.
and most of the time, the tenants that I find are really good, so they make an earnest effort at making the unit as clean as it and in best shape as it can, so that they get to keep most of their deposit. So I'm seeing more of that these days, more earnest effort in making that happen. So in that case, usually when I walk units, they're in pretty darn good shape. But these days, the laws are getting more strict year by year, where you're having to be more thorough on how you document, how much you charge, when you return the deposit. All those things matter. So usually I like to do the walkthrough with the tenant in person so that we're on the same page about all of those things and what they expect. So there's no surprises. And then also you can get your vendors set up for a turnkey that much faster. So that way your ads are up and running ASAP. You're not having to, waste X amount of days on vacancy loss waiting for that to happen.
So if they move out the 30th, how long does it take typically until it's showable again, or how soon can you get a new tenant in?
I can get an ad up probably within a week. So that's from like move out, walking the unit with the tenant, getting the vendors in there. We've got really solid vendors. I'm very proud of them with their quick turnarounds because it beats even companies, big commercial companies as well. It's faster than all those. So all those things matter because from the investor's perspective as well, all that extra time you could be turning could be used to advertise the unit. You could already have the unit rented by then.
Mhm.
So we'll have an add up, I'd say reasonably within a week because from A to
Wow,
Z,
that is
yeah.
fast.
Yeah,
Because
so
I
we'll have
usually
enough for
see a month, you get the cleanup and then people have to 15 days to show it, and most people aren't ready to move in by the first, and you've lost that whole mortgage payment, right? That you got to suck up.
yeah, I mean it adds up, especially if you've got the larger, more expensive properties and a larger mortgage, that 1 week makes a big difference.
For sure, for sure. So, David, what happens if you do get a tenant who's like, you know what, I'm just going to stop paying. My buddy just stopped paying and they're living for free, right? Squatters. What happens when that happens? What are the laws and the rules? And what are the costs to the property owners?
Very good question, Meredith. And this is one of the most very important subjects in property management that we especially can help solve for you and your investors. We of course do our very best to avoid all this on the front end, so you never have to go through it. But in the unlikely event that you do, here's kind of how it works. So some cities are different, and obviously city requirements overcome state requirements. But you first have to, like when you first take over management of property, you have to do a change of ownership forms, and you have to use very specific legal forms that say, we're your new management company. Here's all the information about us. Here is your current lease terms. Here's exactly which term you're on, when you signed, how much you're paying. And you have to have those ideally posted, but also certified mail, and then documenting pictures that you posted it as well. So you have multiple forms of documentation. And then X amount of months down the line, if your amazing tenant just runs into some trouble and has trouble paying their rent on time, You want to address it as much on the front end as you can before it accumulates over several months, because it can take you several months to evict, especially and more in certain districts than others, depending on their court processing times. So,
So you can't just kick somebody out if they're not paying. Like, let's say this month my tenant is like, well, I'm not going to pay. Can't I just kick them out?
yeah, it's I wish it was that simple, but in this case, you have to follow procedure. So typically, how it works is if they haven't paid their rent by whatever the grace period is specified in your lease, it's usually like third of the month, fifth of the month. Then on the next day, then you'll submit what's called a 3-day notice, pay or quit, and then you have to submit a proof of service with that using the proper forms and filled out properly. And then you have to certify it, post it, etc. You have to basically show proof that they got it.
Hmm.
And then they have 3 days, business days, to secure payment. And then by that time, that's when you start preparing the file for your eviction attorney, whoever you decide to use as a property manager. And it's ideal to have one that's very experienced, not just in evictions, but in the specific jurisdiction that you're working in, because in doing so, they'll know more specifics about exactly how long it'll take for the process to complete from A to Z. So then you file the eviction, and then you go through various processes to obtain judgment or and lockout. And so, depending on how your jurisdiction works, after it's served, it can take upwards of 6 or more months, depending on some cities. So by that time, you're already out all that rent. You can't even re-rent the unit during that time. So it's just another good example of how we always focus very heavily on our screening and background processes. We take them very seriously, and we do such a great job on making sure that those are all addressed on the front end. So you'll never have to worry about going through this process. But if you
Have,
do, yeah,
yeah.
that's kind of
Have
what it
you
looks
ever
like.
had to evict somebody?
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
And some but I've overseen properties in California, Washington, other states. Some jurisdictions can take upwards of 9 months. It just depends. So it does take a while. It's much more beneficial, I think, if you run into that situation to do a cash for keys, a payment plan, or something where you're basically, mitigating your losses in the short term rather than waiting for the entire process to unfold. Because you're guaranteed to pay attorney's fees, um, depending on if you have a contract with them, if you're a big company, then you get discounted fees for you doing bulk services with them. Or if you're not, you're like a first-time client, then some of them charge retainers fees, which could be $3,000 plus, depending on how long it takes. And it usually goes based on how many hours it takes them to go through it.
Right.
But you got that, plus you have all of your delinquent rent and then vacancy loss when you do pay the turnover costs as well.
Right.
And by that time, once the person is out, then your deposit won't even, of course, cover more than a month's of rent, and then it won't cover the additional month's rent that they're delinquent as well as your turnover costs.
Plus, they probably trash the place because they're pissed at you and they're leaving a little present for you as they're leaving.
Exactly. Yes. So in those particular turns, to your point too, Meredith, are the ones that are much higher than the $150 cleaning fee and a few
Right.
$100s to do touch up. You got thousands of dollars.
Cement in the kitchen sink, plumbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, good times, good times.
And not just how much it costs, but also they always take longer to rehabilitate as well, those units,
Mm,
just to restore them back to that upgraded condition you had them in as an investor.
yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I've had that issue. We had a condo and it got rented to a property manager here in San Diego who was a friend of the family kind of deal, and they got a bad tenant. Sure enough, they paid the deposit and they never paid the rent again. And 12 months later, we finally got them evicted. And the neighbors were furious with us because apparently these people were really difficult. They trashed the place. I mean, the turnover costs were unbelievable. So, yeah, so it's so important to get the right renters up front, market to the right renters who aren't going to do that. for moral and ethical reasons, not just because they can afford to. So good. Cool.
Exactly. Yeah. And just one other practice that is also helpful too, Meredith, is I think it's a good practice for you as an investor to always charge your first month rent and deposit up front before they move in, especially if you're in a situation where you need to rent it quickly and you want to offer concession. Try and get your concession to hit on maybe month 2 or 3.
Mm,
What that does is that prompts the applicant to gather their finances and make sure that they can pay you as if there was no concession. It shows you as a landlord that they can afford to pay it from the get-go.
nice. I like it. Okay. You
So
actually had to evict squatters?
yes, so I actually had to file an eviction for a squatter. So one of my clients purchased a multi-unit property in San Diego that was just old, beat up, it needed to be demoed and build anew. The
Mhm.
lot, though, was well positioned in a good spot, perfect for new construction. But while we were going through the permitting process, at some point, some of those units were broken into by homeless, and we were able to clear all of them out. But when I was there with the sheriffs to clear out the whole property, there was one unit that was occupied by a squatter with a fake lease and utility
Oh,
bill. If they have it over a certain amount of days in California, they can actually, even if the lease looks completely fake, they have X amount of rights that require you to go through an eviction process. You cannot simply have them escorted out.
oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Even with
so
a obviously fake lease? Jeez.
yes, yeah. So in certain situations, if it's been there too long and it hasn't been addressed, before the acquisition of the property, then in that case, as a manager, you have to be extra careful. So in that situation, we partner with a specialized attorney team, legal team that helps us get through that. So you're basically filing an eviction on the squatter. And so
Hmm.
in that situation, it would have taken between 6 to 9 months to get him out. In that particular situation, we actually got very lucky, and somehow they set themselves on fire. Um,
Oh
and
my
there,
gosh.
yeah, I think they did some kind of type of cooking fire, so they ended up moving out before then. So we didn't have to go the whole process.
Wow.
But
Wow.
but by in doing so, we were able to board it back up and then go through the remainder of the permitting process to get the whole place cleaned up and turn it around.
I
So
would not, as a woman, I would not want to deal with that. They're just the threats of violence and oh gosh, super scary.
exactly. But there are certain things, and that's a very good point. But there are certain things that we do as a manager to per certain types of community resources that you partner with. So when
Hmm.
these things are handled, with a white glove.
Very nice. How can homeowners build to protect themselves from turnover repairs, like preventative, so that they're not having to fix stuff later on? And so, what should they build with?
Meredith, that's a very good point too. I've seen a lot of ADUs out there of different quality. You're going to have, less expensive, more affordable ADUs. You're going to have more expensive ones like this one in Culver City that just have higher quality, more luxurious finishes. Me as an investor, I don't want to pay anything at all, of course, just like you or any other investor on maintenance later. So we try to knock all those types of things out on the front end by installing very high quality product, but product that also is very accessible locally. So high quality, but not like you have to import, parts for repairs if it needs to be repaired. And so whether that's an appliance or a local supplier for any of your tiles, flooring, etc., all those things matter. We try to get more than your typical 1 year warranty on these so that anything that could happen is addressed well within the warranty period and cost you zero out of pocket.
So, where do you see trade-offs like carpet versus tile, choices of countertops, things like that? Like, what do you choose?
I choose zero carpet because just as an investor, I'm a little persnickety about that because I look at carpets as like you got to replace them at every turn. I mean, they kind of
Every
retain good.
turn. Wow.
Yeah. So
Ugh,
yeah, I mean, not like on most
nasty.
turns to keep it to a very high standard, I would say
Yeah.
yes. For sure, because they can retain dirt, they get damaged a little bit easier. So we typically look at hardwood and quartz throughout. It's just much cleaner, higher quality, requires lesser maintenance over time. I think just doing that cost on the front end saves you more on the back end for sure. And they just present better and command a higher price point.
Good. So quartz countertops, I heard you say, are you doing a Home Depot special on your kitchens? What are you doing for this?
Yeah, so some of the like the appliance vendors were like a Home Depot, for example, but we actually for these ADUs went to a local countertop and flooring specialist
Hmm.
who's local in Los Angeles County. So we were able to get the high quality but not pay the high shipping costs or anything like that. So we're able to get those sourced locally. So in the
Nice.
cabinets, you can do some creative things with the cabinets to save some money. Like instead of custom cabinetry, we actually did the two-tone prefabricated. So that saved about almost 10 grand there by just
Wow.
doing that. But
Yeah.
people love the way they look because they've got this. If you do like a two-tone, you
Uh-huh.
can do like a top neutral, like a white, like we did, and then in the bottom do like a an oak finish that
Oh,
looks like the
interesting.
oak wood. And then with the countertop, because I've seen so many ADUs with the same kind of quartz, we went a little bit different, so it stood out from the crowd. It
Yeah.
had kind of a unique design, but it also had a blend of neutral components as well. So it has some color, but it's still neutral. So for example, like whites and grays and beiges. So when you mix them together, they're neutral, but they're warm, and they appeal to most audiences. So from an operational perspective too, I'm also looking at how marketable are my units. Because I mean,
Hmm.
as an investor, you're spending top dollar on getting these built. You want them filled right away, and you want people to be happy and stay in there long term. So we also look too at like how marketable is this, and does this appeal to most audiences? Not just men, but also women, not just professionals, also families, as many as you possibly can. So you can pull from everywhere in the market around you to get those units filled ASAP.
Nice. When I look online, like on Zillow or, whatever for rented areas, my goodness, the professionalism of the photos, like you can tell when a homeowner takes the photos and they just look so ratty. So there's a huge difference. And you see the rents just drop on them over time. It's just amazing the difference.
Exactly. So in ours, we actually had professional photographers come out to take photographs of not just the interior, but the exterior.
Hmm.
So we go in depth. We do virtual staging and we do virtual tours and we do a lot of extra elements that really enhance the quality of your ads because you're not only just competing with other owners, you're competing with professional companies as well, other ones, and you need to stand out from those. Plus, some of them are utilizing some form of artificial intelligence to help enhance their ads. So we need to stand out from those as well. So to
Isn't that
really
expensive? Like how, or is it worth the money?
there's different versions of it you can use that are paid. I don't think it's expensive the way we do it. We're able to utilize it in a way that doesn't cost you anything out of pocket to market your units.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, just mainly the photo shoot. So we figured out a way to make that very cost effective for all of our owners and investors. So that's more money in your pocket. And we know exactly where to market to get you the maximum amount of traffic and therefore faster conversions.
Now, what are you looking for to screen for tenants? I mean, isn't credit score enough?
Yeah. I mean, I like to say it is. I mean, but there's, as you know, credit, like that's, it's a very good point. Credit tells a big story. It tells you a lot. It tells me a lot. It tells me, I'd say a good part of the story. But there's always some things, as you know, that don't always show up on credit. So it's like timeliness of payments, some things that might have occurred on renting it maybe out of state. Maybe at one point the tenant had moved from out of state. Not everything is caught there. So I think between background, income, rental history, and all those extra things that we take into account will give you a comprehensive picture on all those things. So, yeah, very good question.
Nice. Nice. How long do you typically, how long do tenants stay? I mean, what's a reasonable expectation?
I mean, I try to go for 12 months because I don't want them to be too long, too short. Sometimes I get some inquiries for like short-term leases. If that's the case, I try to keep them at 6 months minimum
Hmm.
because if they're too short, even if you collect a premium, you're going to have to turn that unit again. And in the unlikely event, but still possible that that particular turn ends up being a heavy turn, that's more money out of your pocket. And then you have to so for most part, the tenants that we get, we're very lucky, sign around the 12-month term because you have to keep into account too, Meredith, in California, you're only allowed to increase X amount of dollars every year, whether they're on a month-to-month or a term lease. If they're on some odd term lease, like a 7 month, and they expire and they go month to month, your increase amount is still limited to a certain amount every year. So it
Oh,
just makes
wow.
it,
What
yeah. So
what is that? What are those numbers, and particularly for city of LA? Because I heard they're stricter than the state.
yeah, so Meredith, so yeah, that's a good question as well. The cities overrun the state requirements, but in general, how it works is you're not supposed to go above a combined dollar amount of 9.99% per year on rent. And that's everything from rent plus other fees that are charged on the ledger combined. And that number is calculated by looking at like what the basically the CPI as well as whatever the plus 5%. And in some cities different. So when you add them together, it's basically 10% per year.
Okay. Do you raise the do you raise that much every year? Do you not raise it? What is your view on that?
So, I mean, I know rent control is a big subject for a lot of landlords, and I've heard it come up numerous times about where the how much they can increase their rents to get them to market, to get them at the price they want, whether they want to sell it for the right price or just simply to just collect the right amount of rents to to keep up with current property taxes and other bills. Well, if your rents are too far below market, then it's going to take you a while to catch up with those with those current rent control laws. But the way that we're able to comply with that and still get our landlords the rent that they want right away is we just address all that on the front end, just like you do with the screening. We've been able to overcome just about any type of delinquency situation. We're also able to overcome any type of rent increase situation by just doing a lot of research on the front end and pricing our units correctly from the get-go. So there's a few ways to bridge the gap in doing so through a combination of concessions and other charges built into your contract, so that way it's compliant, but it also gets your rents where you want them to be much quicker.
And what happens if a property owner does it on their own and raises rents too much or has any of these violations? I mean, what's the tenant going to do? What's worse? Yeah, what are you seeing out there, especially in LA?
I just think it's yeah, if they're not doing it correctly, then it could come back to get you later. So that's something that we also really look out for our landlords is to keep you in compliance with those so that you never have to run into that situation.
Yeah,
Because it can
that's
cost a lot of money. Yeah, and they'll make you pay fees, penalties, pay back that money. So there's just ways to avoid that on the front end that we're really good at keeping our eyes out for.
Yeah, I've talked about that a fair amount, but it's worth raising again when LA implemented rent control, which is even stricter than, and local different municipalities have different rules. And as you know, there's like tons of these little municipalities everywhere, and every municipality is different. We saw a bunch when LA did that. I saw a bunch of four-unit properties getting dumped on the market, and the comparable sales made sense. You know, you could sell it for 1.5 or 2 million or whatever. But then you went to look at the rents, and these people had been paying like $800 a month for a three-bedroom for the last 20 years, right? So the rents for anybody buying it, this would not pencil out at all. And there was almost nothing that these guys could do. So any new buyer, then they had to say evict based on construction, but now LA prohibits that. You can't evict clients, or they have the first right of refusal for the next 5 years at the same rent if you evict them for construction. What's the details on that? I mean, geez.
So there's a law called just cause eviction. So the just cause eviction gives you a few different options to evict a tenant for no fault of their own. So there's a certain process that you follow. You basically give them 60 days. I would say in this scenario, if you're that far behind on rents, you probably should renovate your units. So do a just cause eviction with for construction, but you have to have your permits ready along with that paperwork for it to stick. Then you
Mm,
submit the right paperwork and you give it to them on a 60-day notice. And then you got to help that tenant find a place to move to. In my
what?
experience, the lower if you can, yeah, there's like a relocation fee that you have to pay them. So some
How
cities
much is
require
that?
it's usually the state requirements minimum 1 month rent. Some cities require two or more, like Long Beach requires two. But sometimes, you'll get tenants come back saying, well, I'd like to get more money. Can I get that? Can I get like $25,000? Can I get more? So it depends, and sometimes that works for some landlords depending on what situation they're in. And in our situation, we're very good at getting that down to an absolute bare minimum. So we're usually pretty successful at getting our tenants out in those situations out for about 1 or 2 months rent. So that's been very helpful. But when I say like you have to help them find a place to move to. You don't technically have to, but my experience is if the lower their rents are, if they haven't been raised rents in years, they're obviously going to be way below anywhere they're going to move to of comparable products. So they're going to automatically have to pay more wherever they go, and therefore
Hmm.
it's going to take them longer to find or afford or apply to wherever they're at. So in that situation, you have to get a little creative and think outside the box and find a way to get them where they need to go faster so that you can get your rents up and get the most for your money too.
Wow. So you're like hand holding these tenants out of the property. That sounds awful. That sounds awful. What about pets, animals, service animals? What are the rules on those?
So yeah, also good question. So with regular pets, you can charge a deposit. Typically, you're not supposed to charge rent on pets, but there's a way you can do like premium where it's acceptable, or just simply raise your rent more, just your base rent more to make that happen. Some landlords are okay with pets. Some of them have had some situation where they had heavier turn costs based on like, what kind of pet damage they experienced. We've been pretty fortunate with that. So usually we just charge a deposit, somewhere around $500 and a pet fee per month, usually around $50 per month.
Oh,
Uh,
so you
and
allow pets for the most part?
I do, yeah. I've had a good experience with them. I haven't personally had really heavy turn costs, whether it's for my own product or for my clients that I've served.
Hmm.
So in those situations, I've been very successful. We had a deposit and rent. But to answer your question too about the service animals is, you can't really charge anything for those. You have to accept them. And the way the state of California works is the documentation that is required to support that is very minimal. So
Mm.
there isn't, I mean, typically you'll get enough information when you request it, but they don't have to provide you with that, any applicant that has it. So they
They
can
don't have
provide
to provide you with like a doctor's note. They can just say, this is a service animal and you're done.
Typically, they can provide like a very minimal type of supporting document. It might not be like the record or something that makes it official, but it would
Uh,
be something like that where, it's like enough for them, but maybe not. It wouldn't comply with older, property management standards, but that's what's allowed these days. I mean, I don't run into too many of those type of applicants. I mean, our applicants have been, from what I've seen, have been very honest about that.
mm.
But yeah, those are some examples of where situations you'll run into with pets.
Excellent, excellent. And I so appreciate these insights because it is a very scary process. Now, you personally, as an investor, what are you looking to do next?
Looking to expand, looking to add more units. It's a very exciting time, I think, to add ADUs to your portfolio, especially down here in Southern California. I mean, they're not going to go away anytime soon, and I think it just solves a really good challenge out there. Yeah, as you know, California's had a housing crisis for quite some time. This helps bridge the gap, and it also, as an investor, helps you. grow your portfolio and just continue expanding. It's a great way to do it. And in my situation, I'm looking to just add more units and just get them in the right markets at the right time and just, yeah, continue growing.
What is your math on the ROI on ADUs? What are you seeing? What trends are you seeing?
So I'm getting pretty good ROI. Like at this one in Culver City, there was a single family home that sat on a 7,000 square foot lot with a pool and a clubhouse.
Wow.
That was appraised at about 1.3 million. So the other half of the lot that had this amazing pool and clubhouse, we ended up compacting it, having it surveyed to assess the probability of adding ADUs, and it actually turned out that we can add up to 4 ADUs. We ended up doing 3 just to keep things spaced very nicely and not crowd things too much. Because if you go too much, then it can also affect how much money you get from your existing unit, the house. So we
Mm-hmm.
wanted to balance that so that the rents were good there too, but you still have that option to build it. So after the construction, we're at minimum double the value of what it was before, but the cost to build was about 300,000 per unit. So it's a no-brainer because what I'm finding too is that the cost to build is very similar across the state, but your markets are different, right? So your margins are going to be a little bit different. So in this particular one, it's in West LA, your margins are much greater. From what I'm learning as an investor too, is that your return is higher if you're building in a market that's more like West LA, where it's closer to a metro, there's more jobs, there's just more demand in general. And so your margins get smaller the further you go out, like further from a coastal location or metro or any popular location like that. So in this case, we saw a very good return because of its position, and the type of market it's in. So
So roughly speaking, each of those units costs you $1,800 to $2,000 per unit. What is the rent you're getting on each unit roughly?
yeah, so because it's Culver City, it's West LA, it's going to get top rents for how small it is. So the existing house is 1,100 square feet. It's getting currently 4,300, but there's still meat on the bone there. I kept it a little bit lower because it was rented during construction.
Oh,
Everybody likes to get lower, like doesn't like to rent during construction. So, but if you
yeah.
still wanted to cover your debt service or at
Oh,
least most of it, that's a good way to do it, and then just raise it later. So that's the rent on that unit. And then on the front, we ended up building a small front house. I call it the cottage ADU
hmm.
because we have a big, huge yard that opens up to it to make it feel much bigger than its size. So it's just under 400 square feet ADU, but it's going to be getting almost 3,000 a month. It's going to be getting very close to that. And then in the back,
Nice.
yeah, and then in the back, there's a duplex of 2 bedroom, 2 baths, and those are going to be getting somewhere between low to mid 4,000 range.
Whoa,
Yeah, per
nice.
unit. So they're going to be doing extremely well.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, yeah, huge success story for sure.
Oh, that's great, David. I am so thrilled. So, if people are interested in property management, where would they find you?
Yeah, you can reach me directly at my cell phone, 949-280-9584, or via email at dkatz@marinerpm.com. That's DKATZ at MARINERPM.com.
Excellent. So, Mariners Property Management, David Katz, both a fantastic property manager and a client of mine. I so appreciate your giving your insights and kind of what you're seeing. It's funny, every industry you think, oh, that's so easy, and it's really not. You really need to be in on the scoop and the trends and the laws, which are constantly changing, right? Thank you for coming and joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right.